Thank you. So I'm Mike Brewer. I am from NOAA, from the National Centers for Environmental Information. I'm the chief of the Climate Information Services branch, but for the purposes of this talk, my other title is the IRA Industry Proving Grounds Program Manager. And the Industry Proving Grounds part of the Inflation Reduction Act grew out of the listening sessions that we held over the last couple of years. Started about 2 years ago. One of them was focused on architecture and engineering. ASCE was a big part of that, both in terms of the content, but also in terms of the prep leading up. So I'm really happy to be here to be able to chat with y'all about what we're doing, what we're planning. A lot of this is still in the planning stage. You'll see this, but you'll see kind of what's coming. Right now, our director, Deke Arndt, is the acting IPG executive director. We've got hopefully a new person on the way who will serve that role permanently over the next couple of years during the IRA timeframe. So just to kind of move forward, just to give you an idea of what this activity is, the Industry Proving Grounds, or IPG, as I'll probably be referring to it throughout. It's basically a way to help industry apply or better apply NOAA's authoritative data and services to provide services out to the public. So it's supporting you doing great things that lead to a more climate ready nation, whether that's standards or the way that you conduct business. We're focused on 3 sectors: architecture and engineering, where ASCE is a critical partner in that arena, and then also the reinsurance and insurance sectors and retail. So what we're looking to do, kind of, if your eyes, hopefully it's not too much of an eye test, maybe if you're on a small screen, but look for the bold text there. So we're implementing IPG to be consistent with the climate ready nation and the direction that NOAA is moving. And that includes both targets to the industry and targets into underserved populations, both directly and kind of indirectly through the industries that we're serving to. One of the primary foci of this is the uptake of NOAA information into those key sectors and earning the advocacy of stakeholders. So that's advocacy with a lowercase a, which is, hey, NOAA does great things for me and we appreciate it. Because of course we wouldn't say advocacy with a capital A and ask you for anything that might be illegal along the way. So what we're looking for in terms of IPG kind of specifically, since we have a limited time frame in order to implement this, is quick and impactful wins that lead to durable solutions through the future. And we want to especially focus those on radically improving the usability of our public-facing information into the sector space. One of the side benefits that we're looking for also is reduce sustainment costs and O&M tails on some of our productions so that we can keep up with some of the new things that we put together and be more efficient in the things that we've been putting together in the past. We're not doing this alone in NCEI. IPG is a cross NOAA activity, interacting with other line offices and making sure that the things that industry needs from us are addressed in the right place inside of NOAA. And we're going to make sure that we keep up to date in terms of making sure people are aware of what's going on, both inside our chain and outside into the industry through engagement. So we're really looking, somebody else, I believe it was Kelly or Fernando, mentioned authoritative data. And that's the focus, of course, of what we do here in NCEI too, delivering authoritative data. And for us, it looks something like this, which is the center of the Venn diagram, where making sure that your science is accurate, making sure that you're taking care of your data in that stewardship sense with our archiving and discoverability and things like that. And then also making sure that there is useful service out into the public or into the user space. And if we can aim and hit that center spot where we're capturing all of those, it's a multiple win, and that's what we're looking for out of this. So kind of what it looks like, just kind of in a general diagram here, the major parts of the IPG look like some program management. You know, that's me and some cadre of folks around me that make sure we report up and spend the money and have the project plans and things like that. One of the other big parts of this is continuous engagement with industry folks. So you can expect us to come knocking on the door a little bit more as this spins up, to start getting down to some brass tacks and specifics about how we can help you in terms of some of the things that you'll see in a minute that we're setting up and that we're doing, and ways that we can leverage parts of the industry, you know, use the task force here when appropriate, but also have maybe smaller groups that help us in other things. We can figure out what that looks like, you know, maybe moving forward. But making sure that industry is involved through the planning for projects, through the execution, through the delivery, through the tool development, you know, all those sorts of things, so that what's coming out is actually useful to you right from the get-go. And then the other pieces of that are data and infrastructure, new products, improved products, ways that we handle products, ways that we deliver products. Big push kind of early on that ramps down a little bit, while some support ramps up in the outer years, like leaving behind code for ways to interact with the data that we have, or leaving behind training or evaluation pieces around the impact of the data itself. And we expect that those would increase a little bit in the out years as more of the data that gets developed kind of becomes mature at the end of the time frame. And then get into some specifics here, and you know, sorry for this slide, it's a whole lot of words. I think the next one is too. But what we're doing in terms of making this work is, we know that we need folks on board to make it happen. So we're staffing up some federal positions. There's the program manager, which is me, who's working on the project now. There's an information architect who's thinking about web delivery, who's thinking about data structures, who's thinking about how we get things into the cloud. That person is on board and active right now. There's an executive director position, which will be in Washington, D.C. In the area that has been through part of the process, is in the federal hiring process right now. And we hope that we will hear something about that very soon. And then there's a support person in the program office for execution that'll be down here in Asheville, that is in an earlier stage of the hiring process right now. But maybe more interesting or more important to you all is that we are also in the process right now of identifying sector leads and points of contact for each of those sectors of IPG that we talked about: architecture and engineering, retail, reinsurance, essentially, so that you will have a belly button for any of these things to come in, kind of the bat phone. You'll know who to call. You can always get that person, get the answer, and they can coordinate back into the space without having to know whether you should talk to me or talk to the executive director or whomever. Kind of streamline that communication channel. And then in terms of us spinning up, we're going to do it in a couple of ways. One will be we'll be bringing on a little bit of Cooperative Institute help to help us in some of the product development space and some cloud transition space. But we're also going to be, right now on the street is a fairly large contract, at least for us, where we will be looking to bring on about 50 people through the course of now through FY26 to help do these things, build the products, build the web presence, and move the ball forward as quickly as possible. There's a whole lot of planning, as I mentioned before, as you've seen throughout this. We're shooting for about a February award date on the contract, and when the contract is awarded is when we will hit the ground running in terms of being able to start producing some things. Up till then, we're in a lot of planning stages and making sure that we got infrastructure right. So the activities will begin kind of in earnest once that contract is in place. And go right away here. Some of the other ways, kind of what this is looking like and other activities inside of IPG. We've got a partnership with the Department of Defense that is on the street right now, or it just closed. I think it just closed actually, to do some high risk, high reward data fusion with industry and with industries that overlap both NOAA and our needs and the Department of Defense, where they can solve some problems for us or try to solve some problems in data usage for us, potentially build into a space where industry brings data into the solution space, whatever that looks like from the OTA, that's other transactional authority, in order to have industry solve industry problems with NOAA data kind of being adjacent and some DoD data being adjacent. I mentioned, this was not just NCEI doing this work. This is cross NOAA. We did have some coordination meetings with NOAA, other line offices, and a number of things came out of that. Expectations with this DoD work, but some partnerships with the National Science Foundation in some industry university incubators. And some of the other things that might be of interest is an industry fellows program that Ben was instrumental in recommending, where we would potentially bring somebody from the architecture and engineering or from ASCE, embed them in NOAA to come solve a problem if it's of interest, and work together hand in hand. And that person would then take a much better understanding of at least our part of NOAA or parts of NOAA back to the organization as we think about the future. Improving projection services is another one. Some event analysis and weather and context activities from NWS. And so we'll talk a little bit more about IDF curves and Atlas 15 stuff here in just a second. I know that'll probably be a question. Some of the other things that we're doing, kind of back to the left side, is improving some of the data that you use, like storm data, as the Weather Service updates storm data, making sure that we are updating our end of that, which includes making sure that it's more accessible than it has been in the past. Building things like a hail climatology, leveraging some radar data. And then kind of a little bit of bookkeeping there. Right now, we're in the FY 23-24 appropriation process, or 23 carryover 24 appropriation process. We're waiting on our final allocation so that we can pay for all this great stuff that we want to do, which then informs what our out years looks like. So we're kind of in a holding pattern on that, but we do want to keep the ball moving forward. And that includes things like this partnership with ASCE, and Joe's here on the phone, and I know that he's going to the Inspire meeting in November. He'll be there. As you just heard, Dr. Spinrad will be too, making sure that we keep in touch. And then once we get the points of contact in place, starting to work those SME to industry points of contact to get down to some specific things that we can bite off as we move forward. And some of that is going to look like this. One of the things is going to be a web information portal specifically for architecture and engineering. That if I heard you all right in the listening session a little over a year ago, you said, hey, let us help you build something that's useful to us. So we're going to be coming and saying, hey, we're going to take you up on that. Let's start talking about what that would look like. Because we know that there are some things like these data sets that we've had documented either in the report from before that Ben shared, the NOAA technical document, or the readout from the listening session, where these things were mentioned specifically in terms of data that is important to you. Are there ways that we can get that into people's hands better, how we can curate that better, and how we can build better tools into those. And like I said, those came from those bullets on the left, which were the listening session and the workshop findings that were published as the NOAA technical And then some things that you can look forward to starting in FY24 or 25 to get new information into your hands, and we'll be talking to see if it's actually useful to you. But things that we heard you ask for, that we put on the list of those quick and impactful wins. Hail climatology, working in partnership with the Severe Storms Lab down in Oklahoma. We have a new wind climatology that will be delivered this year from our Western Regional Climate Center. The NOAA senior scientist asked us to think a little bit about what's the 80% solution on forward-looking IDF curves while we wait for Atlas 15 to get to the finish line through the IRA BIL work over the next couple of years. Are there things that we can leverage that have been done in CERDIP before with Atlas 14 that can help provide some of that answer? Not as robust as what you're going to get in Atlas 15, of course, but if you can deal with an 80% solution quicker while waiting for the 100% solution down the road, that was kind of her thinking and her charge to us. Some other things that we heard you ask for: typical meteorological years from NOAA, historical analogs, sub-daily climate extremes, blending monitoring, historical monitoring, real-time monitoring with forward-looking projections, so that you have a seamless look from the past into the future in a single data set. Disaster impacts at the sub-billion-dollar level to augment our billion-dollar disasters product. The Northeast Regional Climate Center right now is working on a wind-driven rain climatology for us, and in a whole bunch of these and other data sets, like the list that was on there on the screen, the last slide, looking at the transition of those into the cloud for reliability and improved access and availability. And then in the out years, we would be looking at things right now like global climate normals, analysis ready improvements in our information, inland tropical rainfall, frost freeze, extreme wind and flooding, and some historical fluvial flooding down at finer resolutions as we move forward. And through the OTA, through our partnership with the Department of Defense, one of the things that architecture and engineering specifically asked for, I believe it was in the listening session notes, was some information on extreme events as they interact with buildings. So getting down to the very fine scale information delivery for impacts on the actual built environment. And that's one of the things that the Department of Defense activity is actually going to look into at some sort of scale. They've got to figure out whether or not that's doable at a local regional scale, and if that can scale up to a national answer. But that's part of that project. So things that we heard and are taking action. And then just kind of, this is kind of the summary, and I'm about done here, which is, we're doing climate product development based on the things that we've heard you ask for. And we want to work with you so that we can make sure that the web presence that we put together through IPG is something meaningful. We want to make sure that we're building the right data and the right tools and getting them into your hands in useful ways and useful formats. And we want to make sure that you are involved in the process as we build these, not capturing the requirements at the beginning of the waterfall and going away for a couple of years and coming back with something that may not be what you want, but to have some frequent touches with you to make sure that we're on the right track while we can divert our track pretty easily to make sure that what we're doing is useful. And as I mentioned, there will be a dedicated working level POC, name to be determined for right now for this working level and IPG type stuff. If you have questions, if you want to get together, find out more, or how we can chat, or I'll be reaching out too. But I'll be that point of contact for right now until that person gets named. If you need anything, just let me know. Task force, that's Joe. he's here and representing that particular, and I'll be working closely with Joe on this to make sure that we're getting information from both directions. And I think with that, that was my last slide. So thank you. Oh, I think you're muted, Dan, or at least I'm not hearing you.
I said, thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike or comments? Joe?
Yeah, just first, thanks, Mike, for doing that. A couple of things he alluded to but didn't bring up. As part of the IRA, which was about 3.6 billion for NOAA, the total industry proving grounds around 84-ish million, and so in a couple of regards, we did not get those allotments until the late in the year last year. So that's part of the reason for getting started a little later. There were some bigger fish in the pond for acquisitions and grants to get through. And then as we start this fiscal year, we're implementing a new business application system at Commerce and NOAA. And so that's delaying our implementation a little bit to start the year. We think that that'll catch up here shortly. Hence why getting some of this programmatics for this program set up into early next year. So, looking forward to do that. And fortunately, we do have all of the results from the workshops and those engagements and the technical memo to be jumping off from. And we haven't been sitting still. We're certainly working on a lot of these things behind the scenes as we go. So looking forward to continuing that.
All right, excellent. Thanks. Thank you, Joe. Other questions for Joe or Mike, rather, or both? Well, of course, I have a couple. Sorry. I'll try to be quick because we are running a little bit over into the break, but I think Megan will forgive us. So obviously, the first thing that comes out of my mind is like, okay, how does ASCE help? So much of this, kind of speaks to the needs of ASCE. The task force, I think, is well positioned to talk about, what ASCE standards and manuals of practice, how we're going to update those and what those needs are. I just want to emphasize that the task force report that you mentioned, Mike, was really kind of a first cut at it. And we're going to be talking a little bit more here in a couple minutes about follow up to that. But obviously, while I appreciate ASCE has a special relationship with NOAA, there are other A&E entities. So are you envisioning, will there be like a process, or maybe you're not even ready to answer this question, but do you envision some kind of a regular process for engagement with A&E that ASCE can leverage, or what's your thinking at this point?
Yeah, great question, Dan. And yes, I think so. If we can put regular in quotes till we get staff on board and figure out kind of what that looks like. But yes, very good point. ASCE, as I mentioned, they're a critical partner moving forward. But yeah, we recognize you're not the only person, not the only group in the engineering space. So yeah, we'll be reaching out to some other groups too. Probably not a huge number, because I think what you guys need and the things that you guys are asking probably look a lot like what other groups would ask around similar spaces too. We want to have kind of a confluence of the information that's needed, but we know that inside of the time scale and kind of the anticipated pace of moving, that we don't have time to reach out to everybody. And so we recognize that as a limitation. We're going to do great things for who we can.
Well, ASCE has relationships with ASHRAE and AASHTO and some of the others that immediately kind of come to mind. So, if at some point ASCE can help facilitate, bringing some of those groups together, what I'm concerned about, to be blunt, is that we come to you with different needs and different desires and on different time scales. You guys are going to have to make some hard choices, and then we might not like those choices. So I'd rather kind of see if we can't develop some kind of at least a venue where some of the key infrastructure standard setters are kind of there and are able to hear each other's perspectives and maybe take some of those on board. But I see that my comments have elicited a number of reactions, so I don't know who was first. I'm going to defer to Bilal.
I was going to say, before you jump in there, Dan, that's kind of the model that we took for the listening session. And I think you were involved in helping us put that together, where we did bring a number of folks together to look for those confluences. And that's exactly the approach moving forward. But thank you for your offer of assistance, and we will definitely take you up on that.
Okay,
I'll just jump in real quick too and say those other organizations don't have a signed MOU with NOAA as well, like we do. So there is a little bit of a special relationship that's emphasized by Dr. Spinrad in this case as well.
Excellent. That's nice to hear. So Bilal and then Don, and then we'll take a very quick break.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This was very helpful presentation. My question is about packaging the information. I mean, NOAA certainly is very rich with data and information, and based on exchanges that I had recently with different ASCE members, as well as I'm having email exchanges with people in codes and standards in ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. My question is about the portal. I think the portal and displaying the information will be really crucial, just to make it accessible, because there is wealth of information, and my take on it is not that accessible. The reason it's overwhelming, right? So I think there is a need for maybe engagement to establish layers for it. It will be layered, so somebody could dig deeper, but maybe the most demanded items will be the ones that come first, and there is a second layer, a third layer, and so on. Then you could get into the big data and downloading the whole information database and so on. So I think there is a need. It is a comment, not a question. And the question, but I have a question, right? The question is about the MAB program. I know that's in the making as well. Is there a link between the two, or they are just two separate items?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit on my end. In the what specifically in the link?
It's the MAPP program, the MAP program.
Dan,
I think
Dan Barry's program through the CPO.
I could maybe take that, Mike, and you could add on if you please. So one thing that Mike alluded to that's directly relevant is he had that little box and mentioned the forward-looking projections aspect in that box, and that's part of the work that I think is highly relevant here in projection services. So we've been doing a lot of work with Joe, Mike, Deke on the NCEI side. They're going to be very critical partners and really the operational side of this work that we're trying to do under forward-looking projections, and bringing together a lot of the work that the labs are doing. So I just emailed Kelly, really hoping to connect with her on some of the pre-SIP work as well outside of the Atlas and PMP delivery. But the idea is that NCEI is going to be really the key partner on the operational side for that work. And then we've been talking to Deke as well about some of the stuff through IPG and exploring potential connectivity there, including, possibly more research that gets at some of this kind of applied engineering use case that we're exploring with ASCE. I feel like I had one more thing I was going to say, but yeah, NCEI is a key partner. And Mike, I just wanted to help because you and I haven't had the opportunity to connect about the projections work, but I thought I would take that initially, and then I don't know if you want to add anything to what I said, or if Joe wants to add anything as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Another item, ASCE has international presence, and the projects are all over the globe. So to what extent of what you have in mind will have the international coverage?
Yes, thank you. International space, yes. In the projection space, kind of especially, since they are global to begin with. There will be some of the things will have focus into the U.S. Like I mentioned, the wind climatology that was being built, that's being built for the U.S. It's not global yet, so we've got to bite off the pieces that we can handle. And I did want to say thank you for specifically bringing it up. And we are committed to making sure that you guys are involved in helping us put together something that's useful to you. I heard you, the two big things I've been saying for, gosh, a year and a half, however long it's been, are don't bring me the kitchen sink, right? Bring me a subset of information that's useful to me. And by golly, don't make me be a data manager or a climate scientist to be able to use your data and information. And those are my two mantras moving into this in terms of getting how we think about getting that information out. And that will require input from you to help us understand what that looks like to be effective. And we will be doing that through engagement, maybe more often than you guys might want. We might be bothering you more than you think or need or want.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Don, you've got the last word, and then I'm going to do just a little bit of housekeeping. So go ahead.
Thanks, Dan, and I appreciate it. Great presentation, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to add a little bit to what Bilal was mentioning. This interface, I think it's unique to understand when you're doing standards. You do standards that are adopted at a certain time. And so you have to use your projections at that time when the projections at that time are what associated with the standard. And so it's you can't go in and continuously update everything, because then it doesn't become useful as the standard progresses. And so you have to, what I want to say, store data, interface it so that you have that availability at that time if you're going to produce a standard. The next edition of the standard would then use new data. So you have to understand that interface of how standards are legal documents that then they are time stamped, I guess is the best way to put it. And we'd have to do the data the same way. That interface would have to be the same type approach, would be time stamped to do it. But great work. A lot of it will really benefit ASCE in the future. And Dan, I can't understand your question about whether there's another agency that should be doing it. ASCE is just it, right?
Exactly. I was leading the witness, Don.
There we go, Dan. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Don, for that. And if I could, I think, Don, you just made my job easier in terms of thinking about a snapshot of something to support the standards, in addition to the way that we think about continuous delivery inside of some of that projection space. But we'll make sure that we get the pieces plugged into the tools and the data available the way you need it. With timestamps, we're really good at that as an archive, and know how to keep that stamp set that you can continue to rely on for those standards.
I appreciate that. No, great presentation.
All right. Thanks, everybody.